This is UN Squadron, a 1 or 2 player sideways scrolling shooter released by Capcom in 1989 on its CPS arcade hardware. The game was known as Area 88 in Japan and was loosely based on the manga series of the same name. The game is a typical side-scrolling shooter, going against the trend of other Capcom shooters such as 1942 and 1943, which are vertically scrolling shooters. However, like other Capcom shooters, the player has an energy bar that is consumed over the course of a single life as the player sustains damage. This trait is highly uncommon among other comparable arcade-style shooters, which normally use a system of reserve lives, where one of which is lost upon a single enemy hit. Before entering a level, the player can purchase special weapons or added defences in the shop. The player earns money to buy weapons by destroying enemy planes and vehicles during levels, and when the level is finished, any unused weapons are converted back into money. The player can choose between 3 mercenary pilots: Shin Kazama, Mikey Simon, and Greg Gates. Each pilot flies a specific plane and has slightly different capabilities. This was a game that I didn't play in the arcades. I had seen it in various places, but in 1989 I had just got bored with sideways scrolling shooters, having been inundated with them on a Commodore 64. This type of game was easy to code for the home micros, which is why there was so many of them, I guess. And this game didn't look a patch on R-Type, which was amazing. As the years have moved on though, I have developed more of an appreciation for this type of game, and UN Squadron is a game I wish I had played in the arcades, as it is truly an excellent game. The main sprites are tiny, but this is done to contrast the vast hugeness of the end of level bosses, some of which are several screens long, such as the base, and also the floating enemy warship. The other reason for small sprites is to give the player a bigger play area, which can fill up with lots of enemies pretty quickly, and also plenty of enemy bullets and bombs. Each level does require a small degree of memorisation though, and so making sure you equip the right weapons at the start of the level is vital and key to ensuring you survive. Speaking of survival, the game presents a significant challenge. I had to use a cheat for unlimited money just to make sure I could buy the most devastating of weapons, because without it, I just would not have been able to progress. When playing without unlimited money, you could end up repeating the same level time after time after time. The sound is the usual standard fare of bangs and explosions, all of which are perfectly suited to the game. The music is kind of odd though, as I personally did not think that any of the background music fitted with the action of the game. The arcade version of this game has become a firm favourite for me, and I do often go back and play this on emulation, as it has that classic arcade style look and feel to it. The game was not a massive success for Capcom outside of Japan, but it did make its way onto several home formats in 1990 and 1991. This is the version I owned. Well, almost. The version I had was the Japanese version, Area 88. But wait, if this was a genre I had lost interest in, why did I own it on the Super Nintendo? Well, the answer to that question is quite simple. At the time I got my Super Famicom, there were not a whole lot of games available for it, so you basically bought what you could that was good, and Area 88 on the Super Famicom is a great game. It was very different to the arcade version. For a start, this version was only one player, and the 3 characters you could choose from didn't have their own fighter planes, as you had to equip them and buy upgrades as you earned more money. The player was also free to choose their paths by selecting what missions to do next at this map screen. The vast majority of level designs, enemy craft and bosses did make it into this version though. The overall look of the game was pretty close to its arcade counterpart, albeit everything was just that little bit smaller. The weapon shop had an overhaul as well. The shields were gone, but there was a lot more firepower to choose from to equip your fighter, and boy did you need some serious firepower to beat this game. The difficulty in this game was a little bit higher than the arcade, or so I thought anyway. But then, when you are paying 45 quid for a game, you don't want to be beating it in one sitting. The sound was great, spot on to the arcade, even down to the ill-fitting background music, and the booms and explosions were all suitably loud and booming. The slowdown in this game was not a massive problem in the early levels, but when you get to the later levels and it gets a little bit more chaotic, it does become quite noticeable. But again, it wasn't so bad that it ruined the game, just a mild annoyance really. Looking back at Area 88, it was almost like it was a game that had come out too soon in the Super Nintendo's lifespan. As I think, had it come out a year later and on a 16 megabit cartridge, it could have had that 2-player mode that was present in the arcades, and possibly been a more accurate port of the arcade original. But still, even with the differences, Area 88 was a great game for the Super Nintendo, and is one that is really worth a go if you haven't played it already. What are your opinions on UN Squadron? Is it a game that is worth playing or not? Regardless of opinion, please feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. That's all from me, folks. Thanks for watching.